r/AskReddit. What are some ridiculous history facts? Ancient Romans would put sandals on the hands of sleeping people, then tickle their face, so they would slap themselves. Etchu, brute. Fun fact, this is where the idea of stiletto heels came from. If you're interested to know, high heels were made for butchers, so they didn't step in blood. Not sure when or where it started. But yay. When the Romans laid siege to Themyscira, a real place weirdly enough, they attempted to tunnel into the city. The Themyscirans released bears into the tunnels. Bruh, ain't that Wonder Woman's hometown? Yeah, it totally was. Weirdly, a lot of Greek myths tell you real locations where myths happened. And their myths about the Amazons gave them a specific real city to base them in, which later the Romans conquered. Common feature of ancient mythology, actually. There are tons of gods and such that supposedly lived in places that are absolutely real. Mount Olympus is also a real mountain in Greece, but I'm not sure if it was actually believed to be the mythological Mount Olympus or just named after it. Claudius Drusus died in AD 20 from asphyxiation when he tossed a pear in the air and caught it in his mouth. The pear tree was put on trial, found guilty of murder, and destroyed. The Spartans never built a city wall, figuring that their reputation alone would mean no one would dare attack them. But, during the Persian War, the Persians, who had already burned Athens twice, hired a Greek guide to take them to Sparta. But when they got there, they saw a kinda crap looking city without even a wall. They figured there was no way this place could be the mighty Sparta they had heard so much about. So they figured the Greek was lying, and thus Sparta was spared. This is Sparta? No, this is madness. This is not Sparta. This is Patrick. In ancient Egypt, servants were smeared with honey to attract flies away from the pharaoh. Ah, God, that sounds awful. The heat, the stickiness, the buzzing all around you. That sounds like literal torture. I can't imagine they were very healthy with bug crawling all around them. Ah, but they got to keep the honey by the end of the day, something for the family to look forward to. Look kids, dad is home. Go suck the fly honey off his body. The first bomb dropped on Berlin by the British during WW2 claimed no human casualties. But it did kill an elephant. Never forget. The Battle of Bull Run, during the American Civil War, was called the Picnic Battle because so many civilians from Washington went on picnics on the sidelines and watched. But once the battle actually started, and the Union started to get its ass kicked, they all ran away, running over injured soldiers and dead bodies, and generally disrupting the battle. This was actually a relatively common thing during the Civil War. I know it happened at Gettysburg too. Ducking tourist. War tourism is big business. It also happened at the Battle of Watling Street in the year 61. The Iceni were so confident they would defeat the Romans, they gathered round in their wagons to watch. When they were routed and had to fall back, the wagons blocked their path, and that's how Boudicca was defeated. At one time there was not only a pope and an anti-pope, but also a counter-anti-pope. There still is an anti-pope in a sense today. The Pomerian Catholic Church split from the main one in the 70s and claimed their pope as a real pope. They also see Hitler as a saint, so they are not the most sane bunch. They what? Split from the main church. A Chinese emperor escaped an assassin by running around a pillar. After 2 hours, the assassin got bored and went home, and wasn't charged for his crimes. Just imagine. 20 minutes in, the assassin knows he looks ridiculous running around the same pillar this whole time, but he's kind of committed at this point. Besides, how much stamina could an emperor have, anyway? 40 minutes in, the assassin is wondering how much time an emperor has for CrossFit each week. An hour in, the assassin still running in circles trying to catch the emperor, all the while thinking this is so stupid, this is so goddamn stupid. He is beginning to wonder if he was given this mission as a prank. 90 minutes in, the assassin knows with horrible certainty that, whether he succeeds or fails, he's going to be the laughingstock of the whole empire. 2 hours in, both he and the emperor are still wheezing their way around the pillar. The assassin is not only tired and completely humiliated, but also realizes that he's in no shape to be able to run away after the assassination now, and figures his best bet is to give up and hope the emperor sees the humor in the whole situation. Meanwhile, the emperor is sitting quietly on the top of the pillar, eating ramen and watching the assassin running around and around chasing the tail end of his own cloak. At US President Andrew Jackson's funeral in 1845, his pet parrot had to be removed because it was swearing. Colombia has a period in history literally called the dumb homeland period because of how incredibly dumb politicians acted at the time. How long ago? 180 years more or less. But yes, some say it never stopped. 1904 Olympic Marathon in Street. Louis, the first finisher, drove most of the race. He started the race, got tired and heat exhausted and wanted to drop out. He got in a car to DQ himself and head back to the stadium, but along the way, realized he was near the finish line and got out to claim the glory. The second finisher was carried across the finish line by his trainers. On a bogus pseudoscience theory, the trainers had been giving him a mixture of brandy, egg whites, and rat poison instead of water. When it came out that the first finisher had driven most of the course, this guy was given the gold despite the help from his trainers to finish. For some reason, the third finisher was just a regular guy who did nothing unusual. In this case, ordinary was extraordinary. The fourth finisher was a Cuban mailman who had raised the money to attend the Olympics by running around his entire country and asking for donations. When he landed in New Orleans, he lost all the money gambling. He managed to scrounge enough to get to St. Louis and attend the Olympics. However, he had no money for athletic gear, so he ran in dress shoes and pants hacked off at the knee by a fellow racer who happened to have a knife. He probably would have come in first had it not been for the hour-long nap he took on the side of the road. After eating rotten apples he found at an orchard near the course point. The 9th and 12th finishers were from South Africa and ran barefoot. South Africa didn't actually send a delegation. These were students who just happened to be in town and thought it sounded fun. 9th was chased a mile off course by angry dogs. Half the participants had never raced competitively before. Some died. St. Louis only had one water stop on the entire run. This, coupled with the dusty road and exacerbated by the cars kicking up dust, led to several fatalities. The Russian delegation arrived a week late because they were still using the Julian calendar until 1918, while effectively the rest of the world had switched to the Gregorian calendar. Montenegro technically was in war with Japan for 101 years and they signed a peace treaty in 2006. Montenegro was allied with Russia in Russo-Japanese War and they declared war on Japan, but they forgot to peace. Not the only time this happened in history. The Scilly Islands were at war with the Netherlands for quite a while, if I recall correctly. When the Netherlands was occupied by Renaissance in 1940, many people fled to Canada, including Princess Juliana of the Netherlands and her husband Prince Bernard of Lippe-Biesterfeld. Their daughter, Princess Margriet, was born in Ottawa. Not knowing if the baby would be male, and hence the heir to the throne, Canada declared the maternity ward of the Ottawa Hospital extraterritorial, which means it became international territory. This meant that the baby would derive its nationality only from its mother, making it 100% Dutch. The shortest war occurred between Zanzibar and the British Empire, lasting around 45 minutes. Both the British and the Zanzibar Sultanate fielded a couple thousand men with a few boats. However, the war ended with a single Brit wounded. Meanwhile, the Zanzibarians suffered 500 dead or wounded, including civilians, and their entire navy, a yacht, 2 boats and a shore battery, gone. During WW2 a bunch of German soldiers got separated in rural Russia. They were trudging through snow with no food or water for days before finally finding a supply drop that missed its mark. They opened it up and found only black pepper and condoms. Well, the pepper will temporarily make us feel warm, and as for the condoms. Ancient Greek and Roman marble statues were actually originally painted and were colorful. A lot of the statues' paint faded away and went away over time. Some people cleaned off the paint thinking it was debris or dirt. And other people just plain cleaned and removed all of the paint off of them because they preferred the look of white marble. Rome was actually a very colorful city, and it wasn't all made of just boring plain white marble. During the Cold War, there was an idea to drop XL condoms labeled medium onto the Soviets, to make them think USA is anatomically superior and be more afraid of fighting us. Easily my favorite part of American history. Whoops, I dropped my monster condom for my Magnum Dong. Herostratus is the guy who burned down the Temple of Artemis. The only reason he did it was to have his name written down in history. A law was also passed that made it illegal to write down his name for just that reason. Obviously, it is not enforced in modern times. That's where you're wrong, bucko. You're going to jail. The British once sent a guy to China as a spy, so he would uncover the secrets of making tea. The British did as they pleased back in the day. Potatoes were not very popular as a food in France. Like they were seen as fit only for animals. Not only that, but they were considered generally not digestible by humans. So a pharmacist named Parmentier knew they were good food and wanted to popularize them among the working class. So he got a 2-acre farm to grow potatoes and placed armed guards around it at all times. People assumed armed guards meant something very valuable was growing there, so they began to steal the potatoes. That's how potatoes became popular in France's working class. People were buried alive so often in the 19th century that a safety coffin was invented so the dead would have the ability to alert those above ground if they were still alive. I don't think it was that it happened often, but that the stories of it were so spooky they freaked people the duck out. It definitely wasn't a widespread phenomenon, but honestly the devices they came up with to prevent it were just as creepy as the idea of it happening in the first place. During the Viking era, there was a leader named Sigurd. He allied with a Viking warlord named Thorstein. He wanted to conquer more land and expand his territory. He had already been very successful in doing so. This was until he feuded with another leader called Marl Bucktoothed or Marl Tusk, as his front two teeth were abnormally large and buck-toothed. They decided to settle their matters on the battlefield and both agreed on bringing 40 men each for the battle. However, Sigurd ignored the terms and brought 80 men. Bucktoothed had realized he had been betrayed, but did not give up. They killed a number of Sigurd's men, but alas, they were overpowered and were all killed. Here's the catch. After the battle, Sigurd ordered his men to behead all the enemies and tie them to their saddles as trophies. However, as Sigurd rode home in victory, the severed head of Bucktoothed pierced his leg, which led to an infection, killing him soon after.